Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, where we look at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century.
Welcome back to Modern Musings. We are here today continuing our discussion from yesterday about Eckhart Tolle and A New Earth. This is your host, Cindy Murray, and I'm here today with Kristen Murray Hessler. Whoops, I'm still doing that. Why am I still doing it? You've been Kristen Murray my whole life.
You did it earlier, too.
And Amber Garvin.
How's it
Hi.
going?
And
Kristen Murray
You will
Hessler.
always be Kristen Murray to me. Sorry. Anyway, we were talking yesterday, and we really kind of ran out of time because we got so deep into that discussion and looked up and went, ah! So I wanted to pick up today in a little bit different spot and go back to some things that I did not mention yesterday. So one of the things that Tolle talks about is spirituality and religion, and I wanted to pick up there because a lot of people get confused or they wonder how this is applicable to their faith. And first off, I want to stop by saying spirituality and religion are not the same thing, and they are not mutually exclusive. So you can be religious and not be spiritual, or you can be spiritual and not be religious, or you can be spiritual and religious at the same time. One of the things he talks about is that if you are so bound up in your identity with your religion, and that's an egoic form, if you are identified with your religion, well, I'm a Christian, I'm Jewish, I'm Catholic, I'm an atheist, and you are using that to label yourself, then that is your ego again. Which is not to say you can't have that belief system, but if you are identified with that, if that is part of your identity, then it's kind of a rigid construct, and it really doesn't allow you to be spiritual. The more rigidly religious you are, the less spiritual you are. And because religion is more about form and following protocols. It's not necessarily about belief. It's about, what'd you say?
Ritual.
It's ritual. And that's what religion is. Beliefs are different than religion. And spirituality is yet another aspect. And so spirituality is about feeling, it's about consciousness, it's about internal feeling. And so I wanted to make that distinction. How spiritual you are has nothing to do with what you believe, but everything to do with your state of consciousness. And that's directly in the book. So I don't want you to think that we are discounting any kind of religion or that we are trying to teach a new religion. This is not about religion. This is about spirituality. This is about opening your awareness to your inner self. And he actually talks about some things. In fact, the actual title of the book, A New Earth, comes from the Bible, and there's several places in the Bible where in different authors of different books of the Bible have used the terminology a new heaven and a new earth, and they're referring to at some point the existence that we know today will go away, it will pass away, and a new heaven and a new earth will come about. In the Judeo-Christian, that will be at the coming of the Messiah, or whatever. But several other religions have similar concepts that at some point we will be enlightened, or we'll all move forward or move up or whatever. The one of the ones that struck me, and Amber can read this. I think she's got it pulled up here on her screen. Isaiah 65:17-19.
Yes, Isaiah 65:17-19 says, "For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem as a rejoicing, and her people a joy. I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying."
And Tolle is talking about in the book how a new earth, when we come to this state of enlightenment that we must come to if our human race is to survive for any length of time because of what's going on in our earth. And he talks about how we have to come to this new state of consciousness. And he refers to that, that in a sense, that new heaven is not a location, but it's really kind of the inner realm of consciousness. That's our new heaven. Some religions call it nirvana. And then, so it's really the emergence of a transformed state of human consciousness. And a new earth is its reflection in the physical realm. And what he's talking about is that as we enlighten our consciousness, and, that old consciousness will dissolve, it will pass away, and the new earth will begin to be formed. There will be synchronistic, geographic, and climatic natural upheavals, things that will change all over the planet. Those things will happen because of our inner consciousness changing. Our outer world will change with it. The better we become as humans, the better our world will become on the outside. And that's one of the things that he's talking about. That's why we need to do this, because we need to save our earth. We need to undo the damage that we have done to our earth and to our fellow humanity. And do y'all have anything to add to that there?
Actually, kind of something that popped in my head is if you think about, humans on this earth, we're kind of like the organs in the body. And if the earth is the one collective body, the surface of it suffers when the organs don't work properly. Think about, like skin, hair, and nail conditions that form because poor diet, and diseases of the liver and things like that cause other issues that manifest on the outside that's visible on the skin. That's really the way the earth is. The people that keep it running are the organs.
Or we're
damaging it because we're self-destructive. The organs are attacking each other because there is a disease. And actually, Eckhart Tolle mentioned that our brain is a dysfunction. It is a dysfunction because the monkey mind that's always talking and chattering is, that's the problem. It works great, but that's the issue at hand, is that it just keeps going and going and going, and it destroys itself.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Kristen, because it really is like the liver. When the liver starts to fail, then the skin starts to jaundice, and you really can't treat the jaundice. You have to treat the liver. And so he's talking about how we have to treat our consciousness and get ourselves open and aware, and going back to the new heaven and the new earth. When humanity starts to be awakened and we start realizing that we are not this egoist. We are not our egos. We are not these materialistic things, that there's more to us. The soul that is inside of us, the real who we are. And when we become awakened to that, then we will start to change our world. And in a way, that really does create a new heaven and a new earth. And think about it. If we were all the perfect human beings and we didn't identify with monetary things, and we really didn't, discriminate against each other because of the color of our skin or because of our religion or our sexual preferences or whatever, there would be no crying. There would be no sadness. There would be only sharing and caring and love. And really, that's one of the things that Jesus taught. And, love everyone, love each other, and love is everything. And that comes from deep within. That is not an egoic expression. That is from deep within, and deep spirituality is like that as well. Deep spirituality is like a love for all that exists. And in the last episode, Kristen talked about the Buddha and how he gave a silent sermon one time. And you were talking about the flower, but the appreciation of the flower and getting out of your mind and not thinking about this is the pistil and this is the stamens and these are the petals. That was in a way a reflection of, and he was talking about the sermon that the Buddha gave.
Right.
And it was a silent sermon, and he just stared at a flower for the whole time. Mm-hmm. And in the end, only one other person understood the message. And he smiled at the end of it. And it was that he realized that just beholding the flower, being in that moment, feeling the now, and appreciating the flower without thinking about it, without labeling it, without identifying with it, just appreciating it for what it was right then. And that is that opening of that awareness. And so we want to talk some more about the ego, because obviously this book is all about the ego, or that's one of the big things about the ego. And I wanted to share some things that I picked up from the book. And we talked about labeling ourselves or identifying with things. And a lot of people say, well, I love this ring because it belonged to my grandmother and, whatever. But we're really not honoring that thing if we are using it as a mean to self-enhance us. If our big mansion makes us feel better about who we are because we have this big mansion, then you're not really honoring that thing, that mansion that you built. You're actually trying to find yourself through it. And a lot of times that's what the acquisition of things are. And that's the problem with the ego, is that it's always trying to find who it is through things, by filling that box that we talked about. And it will just keep putting things in there. And we just have to learn to not try to identify ourselves with all those different things. And so I wanted to touch on one of the things he talks about, when do you know that you're going to become enlightened, and how do you become enlightened? How do you open that awareness? And I think he mentions in the early part of the book that if you're already reading this, obviously it is already opening for you, because you wouldn't be reading this if you weren't open to learning more or experiencing more or trying to search that out, because people who are totally closed don't even realize.
It's not that they don't care; it's that they don't realize.
They don't realize that there is
they're
something.
still asleep. That part of their
whatever. Yes,
you can't even say
asleep.
that part of their mind is still asleep. It's just their being.
Right. And he does talk about how a lot of people actually come to awareness when they have a loss or a tragedy or something like that. A lot of people who live through a terrible illness, or maybe they've escaped the third world country, or something like that, and come to America, and they have a different appreciation for what where they are and what exists. I know for me, a lot of mine, I've always been a little bit more aware, but a lot of my awareness developed after I had cancer. And I have had breast cancer, and I'm now 5 years out with no cancer. But when I first was diagnosed, I had a very different mentality about it. I could have sat there and said, "Oh my God, I have cancer. It's terrible. Oh, poor, poor, pitiful me." And I really didn't. And I kind of set out with the mission that, oh my gosh, I've got cancer, and I want to kind of do even more. I was already doing fundraising for Susan G. Komen and walking in the 3-day and things like that. But I became even more of an activist and tried to remind people to get their mammograms and stuff like that, because
share your story.
Yes. And Kristen talked about also too, moving through something like that. And I know a lot of people.
Oh, right. So when you go through something difficult in your life, think about you're going through whatever that terrible thing is that you're having to go through. Think about it like a forest. When you come out on the other side, you went through the forest. You did not become a part of the forest.
Right. And that's one of the things that Tolle talks about, is he doesn't say the words, but I use the words victim mentality. And I know a lot of people who look at themselves as a victim of their circumstances, and they identify with that. So people who have illnesses, well, I have cancer, and so I'm always going to be a person with cancer, or I'm a diabetic. People who identify with different things, I'm deaf, or I'm blind, therefore I can't do this, or I can do that, or I have this debilitating disease, and that becomes totally their identity. Everything that they do is wrapped up in this. It affects their work, it affects their sleep, it affects their relationships, and it really just becomes a part of who they are, not something that is occurring in their life. And they get a lot of attention from doctors and other people. But that's, it's kind of the ego is holding on to that, and once the ego grabs onto something like that, it's not going to let it go, because that's a biggie right there. That's a big one that you can hold on to for a long time. That identity will take you many, many, many miles. And that's one of those things that, yes, Amber.
I've always believed that anything can be overcome. And as you said, like, people hold on to the victim mentality, like, oh, I can't do this because I have a mental illness. Oh, I was taught that I can't do this because I'm autistic. Oh, I was taught that I can't do this. I can't I can't read a book, I can't do this because I have ADHD or dyslexia, and that is not the case. Like
I agree.
that is not the case at all. You can overcome anything that has been thrown at you. And you were talking about how you had cancer, and I also had life-threatening, not cancerous tumors in my ovaries, and this was about 10 years ago almost. And they had gotten bad to the point that, like, I was slowly dying. The poison was slowly seeping out into my body, and I was dying. And I didn't even realize it. I thought that, oh, my back hurt because I'm fat. But that's not the case. My back hurt because I had 2 tumors inside my body that were the size of small children.
Yeah, and but that did not identify. You did not identify with that. That's not who you are. And it's just like Kristen said. You go through it. You go through the forest. You don't become the forest.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get lost in the forest of illness and let that become
or grief.
Who they are.
So have you guys ever seen Neverending Story, and he goes through the swamp of sadness?
Yes.
They're drowning in the sadness. And I think a lot of people who can relate to this movie, when Atreyu and his horse Artex are going, they know they have to travel through it, and it's just mud and like broken dead trees and stuff. And Artex, the horse, obviously he gets consumed by the sadness and he drowns in the mud, and he becomes one with it, like you would become one with the earth when you die. That is all he was left. He became mud probably. He disintegrated into the mud. And, you either come out of that stronger, or what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's really, that really stands for that. Didn't you highlight a passage that you were really something about yielding?
Oh yes, there was a really great thing back here. Let me find it again before I lose it. So when he's talking about people becoming enlightened and stuff, a lot of times it happens through loss. And it's people who deal with loss or tragedy or whatever circumstance. You really have a couple of things that you can do. One is to resist the loss, resist the change. You want to stay in that state that you were, or you can yield to it. So, there's a great example is someone, and I, this is me. I'm diabetic, and when I was diagnosed with diabetic, I resisted the idea of being diabetic because I don't want to eat good food. For me, I want to eat sugary foods, and you can either resist that.
Fight it.
Struggle. Yeah, you fight with it, or you can accept it. So if you yield to it, if you accept it and you yield to it, then you're accepting what is.
Let it pass.
And you're open to life going on.
Right.
And a lot of people who are dealing with grief get trapped in the grief by resisting it. They want to hold on to that life that they thought they were going to have. They want to hold on to that relationship that they had and not move on and move through it.
And that was me for many years.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who get trapped in that.
Talked about this before, but about 4 years ago, my dad died, and I got lost in the grief. And my mom got lost in the grief, and it ultimately killed her because a year later she died. And I believe that she died of a broken heart. I mean, I know on paper it was a heart attack, but she didn't even have heart problems up to that point. But over the next year after my dad died, she lost over 100 pounds, and she started disintegrating pretty much.
At a very young age.
Yeah, at a very young age, early 60s. And then she ultimately had that heart attack and fell over and died. And for a couple of years after that, I was totally lost, and I didn't know what to do with my life. And then earlier this year, I got a divorce from my ex-husband, and I was lost with that as well, until one day this last summer, I decided that I was moving on with my life. I was going to make a whole life overhaul, because I didn't want to be lost anymore.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to who I was before all of these tragic things started happening.
I remember when you first started the process with the separation, going into like, I think we're getting divorced, you had like this identity crisis almost. I remember you telling me like, I don't even know who I am anymore, because you were so consumed with all of the stressful things. Like, your mind probably never left grief of my dad, grief of my mom, now loss, grief of this failing relationship, and then all the stress of everything else on top of it. Because I know you guys were struggling with, a lot of things in your relationship. And when all of those things kind of weigh you down, you literally get stuck in that forest, and you forgot who you were. You were lost, becoming one with that forest. Like, you get petrified almost in that forest.
Scared to be alone, scared to move on.
Sand,
Scared to, like, I kept thinking that maybe we would get back together. But then, like, as time went on, I realized that's not what I wanted. I wanted to move on with my life.
Right.
And now I feel like I have reached happiness.
Right. And I think that's where the word yield, you have to think about the word yield. There's two parts to that. Think about when you're driving. When you yield, you're stopping, sort of.
Mm-hmm. And assessing
the
danger of proceeding.
Yes. And you're going, okay, whatever's coming, I need to let it through. Whatever that is, it's traveling. It's not a four-way stop sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where people get in an impasse, because they stop and they get stuck in this part of their life where they can't get out, because they're stuck in grief, or they're stuck in disease, or they're stuck in identity crisis. Whatever it may be, they're stuck in poverty, or they're stuck in gender confusion, and they can't get past. Let it pass. Let whatever it is that you're suffering through, or whatever is trying to
yield, let it
pass through.
Let it go through.
Let it go through. Just
Yep.
watch it go by. Let it go.
And there are consequences to not doing that. And that was one of the other things I wanted to bring up, is that whenever you are taking on inner resistance to whatever that is, whatever action that you take, which is usually negativity in some way, becoming a victim, being stuck, being angry about your circumstances, giving blame about your circumstances, not moving forward with your life, then you are actually creating more outer resistance, and that negativity and that resistance, the outer resistance, and the universe will not be on your side. Negativity breeds more negativity, and life will not be helpful to you, is what he says. If the shutters are closed, the sunlight cannot come in. I thought that was pretty profound. If you are so negative and you've got your shutters closed because you're resisting that change or whatever, then the light can't shine in on your life.
Yes, I recently had somebody that came to me, and they were talking to me about their problems, and they were asking me, why does this keep happening to me? I don't want this. Why does this keep happening to me? And I said to them, it's your attitude. You are looking at this from a negative point of view. As long as you are negative, negative things will come to you. You have to go through life with a positive point of view. And that's also something that I try to stress to my students, is that you have to look at things positively, because you will manifest positive things if you are looking at it positively. If you are looking at it from a negative, you will manifest negativity.
That's true.
I actually have a real life scenario just the other day. You know, I'm married, newly married, and we've only been married for a year and a few months, and you know, we're still understanding each other's, you know, ways and habits, and my husband and I are still learning how each other manipulates our funds and handles our money. And I gave my husband a task. He had a bill. It was like a $35 bill. It was a medical bill. Unbeknownst to me, there was additional part to that bill, but I had a feeling there might be something else with it. So I told him, call the number, ask them if this is all there is, if there's other, you know, sometimes they have multiple accounts that go all into one bill. And so, you know, I just wanted to know like all the details first. And it was only $35. So I was like, okay, after you're done talking on the phone, please write a check for the $35 and we'll mail the check to them. And he probably forgot or decided to go on his own way with it, and he went online instead of calling, and he went and paid it, and it was actually like about $480. And he didn't even pay attention to it. He just paid it and moved on about his life. And he's not the type to check his checking account. I'm usually the one that looks for him. And I saw the charge and I was like, oh my God, what was that for? Why is our account smaller than it was? And I went into panic mode. You know, the whole scarcity mindset like triggered me, and I exploded. I was like a volcano of anger, and you know, I yelled at him, and you know, he listened. My husband is so patient. He just listened to me and let me.
He's the best.
I just like went, you know. Some of you guys can identify with that. I was really stressed out about it. And I look back at it, I still have money in my account. The bill got paid. You know, I look back at it today. I mean, it just happened a couple of days ago. And I think, wow, if I had just accepted it for what it was, because me being angry was not going to change anything. All it did was stress him out, make him feel bad. I felt really stupid because I was the one upset about something that he did. It wasn't even about me. But I made it about me. And I was really like out of line with my energy. It was very negative. And, you know, we had a long conversation. Well, it was pretty one-sided, I'll admit. But it was unnecessary. And now I look back, like I could have changed that behavior into something, even if it wasn't exactly positive, it could have been more neutral, because neutral is definitely better than negative.
Yeah, totally. And going back to that negativity, breeding negativity and stuff, I know so many people that like Amber was saying, you know, they say, why does this happen to me? Why do all the bad things happen to me? And I know for one, I was one of those people at one point in time too. I used to do that. Bad things would happen to me. And then I would just go, why me? Why is it always me? And I actually know a couple of other people, and this is going to really illustrate some two different ways of looking at something that is very similar. So I have two very good friends, and I'm not going to use their names, but they both have a couple of different but debilitating illnesses, and one of those people is still such an she came into this disease, and it's very debilitating, and it's caused her a lot of problems, but her outlook on life is still so positive, and I never see her complain about how she feels. Now she will say, I gotta rest for a while because the heat of the day makes me really tired, or I can't stand anymore or I can't sit anymore because my legs are shaky, or I'm getting weak, or whatever.
I'm going to call it a day because I'm getting a little tired.
Right. But she never complains. She never tries to make people feel sorry for her. She's just always such a positive, happy person, and it makes her pleasant to be around. And then there's another person who has a disease, and it has so affected her life that I just want to reach out to her and hold her and say, don't let this control you. Don't let this define you. Move through it. Move through it. Don't let it stop you from being who you are. And it does. And there's two kinds of people in this world. There are the people who accept it and yield to it and let it move through them. And then there's the people who resist it and fight it, and the negativity comes back as karma. We often call that karma because their negativity keeps them from moving forward in their life. And
or you could just say it comes back as stress.
It comes back as stress. It really does.
When
It's
you're
all
stressed,
that negativity.
then everything else comes more stressfully to you.
And that actually affects your health even more, because the more you stress about those things, the more that stress causes further injury to your body. And so the message from Tolle is to yield to it. And he talks about that further. He says, once you yield, there's two things. You can either, if there's an action that's possible, then your action will be in alignment with the whole, and it will be supported by creative intelligence and the unconditioned consciousness, which in a state of inner openness you become one with. So then circumstances and people then become helpful and cooperative. So in taking that positive action through that yielding and accepting what is happening, then the universe starts to work in your favor. And the secret to that is, what can I learn from this? And that's what a lot of people do. What can I learn from what is going on in my life right now? What can I take away from this experience? And I think that was what I got from my own cancer, was what can I learn from this? Obviously, I accepted the fact that I had cancer. I moved on. I got treatment, and I am recovered from that cancer. And I don't identify with cancer. In fact, sometimes I feel like when people call me a cancer survivor, I almost feel guilty, because my experience with cancer was
not as grueling as
it wasn't. I did not have to have a full mastectomy. I had a lumpectomy. I had radiation. I did not have to have chemotherapy, but I have been on medication for the last 5 years. And the medication it causes problems. But, I just look at it as the price I pay for surviving this. And I asked myself, what can I learn from this? And because of my cancer, I became a more spiritual person. I started exploring my spirituality more. I started rereading my Bible. I've read my Bible probably 3 or 4 times in the time since I became diagnosed, and really studying it and learning from it and narrowing down my belief system. And but even more than that, it has opened me up to a world where I feel like I have something to give. And that was what pushed me towards having this podcast, because I felt like I was being guided down a path where I had some things to share, and I wanted to share with people what I have learned. And so that is the action side of yielding. And then there is also a no action possible side of yielding, and that's where you just rest in the knowledge and the peace that comes with surrender. And that's often what happens with people who get a terminal illness. They know that end is coming, and instead of fighting it, or being, when I say fight it, obviously if it's terminal, there's not a lot of fighting you can do, but a lot of people get angry and resent that it's happening to them,
or they give up,
or whatever. And yet the people who surrender to it, they say, okay, well, I'm dying. I'm going to make the most out of my life. I'm going to accept that this is my fate. And I'm just going to feel, and I'm going to rest in that peace and knowledge that I have surrendered. And that's where, as Eckhart Tolle says, you rest in God. Their faith takes over, and they feel at peace with what's happening.
You want to know something interesting? 100% of all people die.
This is
so
true.
We are all terminal.
Well, this is true. And
so
accepting
live
that.
your life. Accept it and live your life.
Right.
Like you are dying from a
Yes.
terminal illness. The thing is that there's no set end date for any of us. Accidents happen, illnesses happen, and then some people live to be 120 years. But if you accept that and live in the now,
Right.
then you won't get stuck at that 4-way stop.
Right.
And you can live your life. Once you accept that and you get that weight off of your chest, then you can live.
Right. Appreciate what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Love the people that you're with. Be in the moment. Create joy where you can create joy. We talked about this during the holidays, during the podcast, about how I like to, last month, creating that hygge in my home and having the children come back for the holidays. But just kind of living in the now and accepting your circumstances as they are, and then making the most of them. It doesn't do any good to resent your upbringing, your poverty, your childhood abuse, the weight that you've put on.
The past is the past.
The past is the past. And
move forward.
We'll talk more about that in future episodes, because I know the ending to the story of this book. But we'll go into more of that later, and the more profound, even more profound things that have crept up on me from this book. And but Oprah, as Kristen said, Oprah calls him the
father of
now, and that's really what everything is about. And I know we've been talking a lot about the ego, but really it's hard to appreciate the now if you're all wrapped up in your ego. And that's where we want to get to, where we can find the inner stillness within us and find the true sense of self. And there's actually a really cool exercise in the book, and I kind of wanted to go over this if we're okay. I'd like to close our little chat with this. So have you ever been laying in your bed and you're like maybe half asleep or something, and you can't identify where your hands are, maybe you feel your hand, but you really can't tell if your arm is up above your head or if it's laying out beside you. So this is kind of a sensory exercise that he points us to. So you're supposed to close your eyes for a minute, and I want everybody to just close their eyes for a minute. And I want you to see if you can find out if there's life inside your hands. So don't ask your mind, because your mind can say, I can't feel anything. But it might also say, give me something to feel or something more interesting to think about or whatever. You know, your brain may going all over the place because that's the monkey mind just chattering away. But instead of asking your mind, go directly to your hands. And by this, he says, I mean, become aware of the subtle feeling of aliveness inside your hands. It's there. You just have to go there with your attention. You may get a slight tingling sensation at first, and then a feeling of energy or aliveness. If you hold your attention in your hands for a while, that sense of aliveness will intensify. And some people won't even have to close their eyes. They'll be able to feel their inner hands at the same time. Now go to your feet and keep your attention there for a minute or so. And eventually you can feel your hands and your feet at the same time. Then you can move on to other parts of your body. The abdomen, the chest, your arms, your legs. You can just keep going. And this is basically a form of meditation. Tolle calls this the inner body, and it really isn't the body, but it's the life energy. It's the bridge between the form and the formless. And he encourages you to make it a habit to feel your inner body and as a regular basis, just kind of check in with it. In a lot of, in other cultures, they might call that your chakras. You're just feeling what is inside you, moving from different areas of your body. And that formlessness is what he calls being. And it's your essence. That is your identity. So what you're feeling, that aliveness that's within you, that is your being.
The difference between a human and a robot.
It is. It is. Robots don't feel. They only think. Very profound. So we're going to start reading the next 2 chapters.
Mm-hmm. We'll give you plenty of time.
Yeah.
We'll give you a heads up to keep an eye on the blog so you can see when to expect.
Right. We'll tell you when the reading is coming up, and we'll have another check-in with the book and go into the more the next couple of chapters. And I'm really looking forward to getting deeper and deeper into this with you guys. There's some really profound things in this book. It's really changed my outlook on everything. I keep saying that, and I can't say it enough. It's amazing.
This type of discussion that we're having is ultimately our end game. This is what we wanted Modern Musings to be about. In addition to the fun, lighthearted things like your celebrity hot crush and just fun things to talk about, but also the deep stuff, because the deep stuff is really who we are.
Because we just, whenever we're doing our crafting and everything like that, we sit around and we talk about this stuff all the time. So now we're bringing it to you
and we're
guys.
sharing it with you guys. And, we had mentioned earlier on, in season 1, that we were starting off because of the time of the year. We wanted to introduce a lot of the goal setting and,
holiday things. And we will check in with those things throughout the year.
We'll probably do some more of that holiday, like the December daily next year. But, this is the beginning of the year, and we're talking about, starting our new goals for this year. And we really felt like this book is a great gateway drug into these types of discussions, because it is really, I feel like goal setting, the purpose for goal setting is to keep me in line with my enlightenment.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really excited about going deeper into all of these things. So we will have more fluff too, but we'll have these deep discussions. We'll have, as I mentioned before, my word of the year for this year is now, and it comes directly from this book. And I didn't even know it because I read it. I read this book last summer, and it wasn't until the fall that it started coming up, over and over and over again in my life. The word now just kept popping up, and it kept taking me back to this book. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring this book out, and it's a perfect time for it at the beginning of the year to start this conversation, because it really does go along well with our goal setting things and our word of the year and some other things like that we're doing. So I look forward to sharing more with you. I hope you look forward to coming back with us. Next week's episode is eating healthy on a budget. So that's a little bit different direction, but we've got some great ideas for how to eat healthy on a budget.
It's still in the health and wellness direction.
Oh,
though.
Definitely. And fun too. Hey, there's some fun things in there. And we actually do have a lot of fun things coming up later on as well. So thanks for listening. Thanks for coming back for this extra bonus, almost an hour of discussion on this book. And we hope that you'll give us some likes and give us that 5-star rating on our podcast to help us get more listeners.
Yeah, and if you read the book, let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Of the first 2 chapters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Join this conversation with us. Join in and
conversation.
Come over to the Facebook page, the Facebook chat, or leave comments on the blog. We really want to hear what you took away from this book. And I can't wait to share more things with you.
Oh, yeah, and we also want to give a special thanks to Red Door Studios, Creative Audio Tech, and Rimshot Graphics for our music, gear, and graphics.
Yep, they've been very helpful to us in getting this podcast off the ground. And thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.